Good morning. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm really looking forward to digging in to some of these, to all of these works today. Some of which I am less familiar with, some of which I am intimately familiar with, all of which have vast color worlds that are not the things that you usually think of when you think of singing. So much of our ideas about singing are shaped by a vast tradition that I love. Two amongst them are, of course, opera, and then the art song tradition, lieder tradition. So you kind of have, those are like two opposite poles in a certain way, right? You have voices singing above gargantuan ensembles and in these heroic efforts that are thrilling, and then voices in a very intimate environment, but with essentially one color of the piano behind them. The piano is asked to suggest a whole world of sound and color. What I love about what's happened in vocal music in the last 100 years is that the mainstay now of vocal music is really instrumental in a way, and that singers are invited to investigate color worlds in small and large environments, medium-sized environments, but to be inspired by musical, instrumental timbres, and then also the other way around, that the instrumentalists become more vocalists in a way. There's an interplay and a dialogue in the music that you're going to hear today that I find extremely rich and satisfying and kind of bottomless in the way that we can, in the things that we can discover in it. So let's just hear some music, right? Here we go. Thanks.
I'm Mundy, and this is Clare Monfredo and Tristan McKay, and we're going to perform 4 songs to E. Cummings by Morton Feldman, written in 1951. Cracks work the crying nightmare. Dancing wheels and words.
Great. You've done a lot of Feldman.
I've done some, yes.
Mm-hmm. So I heard a few years ago Charlotte sing this. Well, you tell what the piece was, right? It was the Resbod's.
Oh, yeah. Three Voices by Morton Feldman. So this is a very early piece written in 1951. Three Voices is one of his last pieces written in 1987, and it's a 50-minute long piece for one voice and two pre-recorded voices, and it's gorgeous, but it's like very static and consistent sound. It's like a sound bath kind of, and this is very, it requires some of the same skills, but very different music.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so one of the big challenges in a piece like this is that it's so atomized, right? It's so pointillistic. Does anybody want to venture a guess as to what the piece is about? Did anybody get any text, any words? Got some words. Mm-hmm. And of course, the poems are E. Cummings, right? Do we all kind of know what that means? Yeah? Could we put up the first poem? Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, there we go. That's the whole thing. Fantastic. So in the two contexts that I had talked about before, the kind of poles, opera, art song. Opera is about stories, in a way, narrative, right? Art song is sometimes kind of about tableau. It's about emotion. It's about an idea. It's a poem that can be more abstract than narrative. So that's kind of like an XY thing. And then there's this other thing that happens that's like Z, where we're dealing with the idea of sound. So these poems were from the 40s, 50s, right? And this was at a time when the study of linguistics was nascent, and the aesthetically, the kind of ideas of pulling things apart in the even in the scientific world, right? We're gonna dig deep and go to the atomic level in everything, and this is happening in art, of course, too. But yet we have this expectation when you have a body on stage and a singer. As an audience, we expect to understand. We expect to be illuminated in some way. A human is telling us something, and we're supposed to understand. And so that's a conundrum for singers, players, to convey a message where the message itself has been deliberately obscured. Tell us how you approach a text like this.
That's a good question. How I approach a text like this. I think that Feldman, when he wrote these pieces, he was being very playful and he was experimenting with things, and I don't think he necessarily wanted to. I don't think he wanted me to tell a story necessarily.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I think I approached this text thinking, how can I give the audience some chance of understanding some of the words, I guess, and sing it in tune and sound like kind of nice. So it's mostly with, especially when I first approached it, mostly I was just thinking, like, how do I execute this in a way that will sound cool?
Right. So could we see the first page of the score? So atomized text kind of turns into this atomized looking score where nobody, if you look vertically, there's almost nothing that's happening together with anybody else. So that even starts to break down some of the chamber music kinds of things that we've all learned to do, like breathe together and go, you know, and like the gestural world has also been a little bit neutralized. And so what tends to happen as a matter of necessity is that we're all like, okay, this is the pulse. This has to be the pulse, and we're just gonna lock into this pulse and like do our thing. And then as we rehearse, we learn each other's position and all of these things. Oh, you go, and then I go, and then you go, and then I go, because, you know, just like everybody's sense of pulse is actually a little bit different, right? And that gets, I mean, it's fun to a certain point, right? But then the music starts to become all about that again, right? And kind of not about how we are going to experience this time together. So I really feel like all music, all performance, theater, is this way. We all convene, and between the time we got here and the time we leave, something occurs that we all participate in, and we all have a sense, our own personal sense of what happened, but the people who are structuring that time are the performers. And so our job, in a way, is to be architects of the passage of time and to mark that in the most, not only specific way, in the most meaningful way, and that doesn't have to be narrative. So it's really tempting and, of course, necessary when you look at a score like this, especially as a singer. What we do is not digital. We have to get it in our ears. And so we're like, notes, 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 notes. We have to get these pitches. They're happening all over the place. It's not easy, right? It's not easy. And there's all kinds of practice strategies that we do. And, you know, it's involving. But I think the place to start with this, and for everybody here, is actually not with that, but it's back with the poem again. And Feldman set those words, but those words have their own interior logic that is independent of the literal meaning. So one of the things that's a very convenient thing to, as a home base to work from as a teacher, a voice teacher, is that words sound like what they mean. It would be great if that were true. It's actually not true, right? And linguistics has proven this in every language. Words do not sound like what they mean. Words are just like if they mean that thing, this activity. And then there's a whole bunch of things that grow out of that. Relationships grow out of that over, you know, syntax and you know, conjugation and all that kind of stuff. And words are related to each other, absolutely, right? But words themselves do not sound like what they mean. However, as a performer, every word must sound like what it means because we have to communicate something through sound. And even if we're not doing something that's narrative, in the moment, what does that first thing mean? How do you find out what it means? How do you do it, Charlotte?
I read the whole poem, I get an impressionistic sense of it, and then I sort of read it again for meaning, I think, maybe?
So how do you read that poem? Read
like
it.
If I were to read it out loud?
Yeah, can you read it for us?
Black against white sky, trees which dropped, leave go swirling.
Mm-hmm. How would you read it?
Black against sky, tree with dropped leaf goes whirling.
And Tristan?
I think I'd do a bit more of a literal
Okay.
line by line reading. Black against white sky, breeze which from drop the leaf of I go swirl go.
Hmm? Yay, all three. Yay. Okay. You are reading this poem with the knowledge of what Feldman did to it. And of course, none of us read these poems in a vacuum because we all have some idea of this kind of style, but there's something in that seems like, oh, everything should be short. But what if we were going for, as, you know, in so much poetry, you don't stop at the end of every line, you actually go and try to make some sense, right? It could be black against white sky, right? You can make lines out of that kind of thing. You can use inflection. Or you can go the opposite direction. That's stretching things out, right? You can go the opposite direction and atomize it even further. Black. And notice that the C and K are separated. Well, what does that mean? Right? We don't say them twice in that word. Black. There's something that could happen to black. The air is stopped. And that has implications for what one does technically with something, right? Black against T. I don't know, right? But like to go into all of those sounds and then like really start to like roll them around in your body and feel them and like, what are all of those possibilities? Just with the poem. Can you play with that just a little more?
Black against
Okay, good. Now, this, right? You're like, oh my God, there's all of these stuff, all this stuff is backing up on me, right? Mm-hmm. So then the thing is, when we start to play with those words, we have to start to look from a singer's perspective of what is inhibiting and what is enabling behavior, right? And so can we still get the same kind of visceral feeling while only, like, I'll just use the example of the right? Letting that air really back up and only having that point of friction at the exact location that it needs to be, and then the rest of the body behind it is free and ready, right? You want to just try that, just something, okay. Good, so when you do that, I'm feeling all of this pressure underneath. I want you to dance around. I want your body to get loose. But while you're doing, yes. And now, are you experiencing subglottal pressure? And it'll make you move differently. Yes. And now, that has more resonance. What's your experience of that?
Yeah, totally. Yes, I can feel it.
Yeah. So finding the place where phonemes can be produced resonantly and freely, and we're talking about consonants here. And I have to tell you, in singing, nobody ever talks about consonants. We're always taught about sing on the vowel, sing on the vowel. Well, what do you do when you have something like this? You have to make your consonants in the same resonant spaces as the vowels. As a matter of fact, consonants carry you from vowel to vowel. Anybody who says they're singing on the vowels and is a great singer is lying. Right? If they're a great singer, they're not only singing on the vowels. They are singing the consonants. The consonants are in the resonant space. Otherwise, they would not be able to communicate any of the linguistic content to you. Right?
Yeah.
So let's go back to the music in this first one. Great. Now there's durations given to these things. And of course, pitches given to, look at that, the K. In the second bar, in the top line there, that K, which is normally not voiced, is to be intoned on an A flat. How do you do that? Did you make the decision to actually do it or to imagine it?
I made a decision to go cut.
So you added
Like a shadow.
a shadow vowel. That's what that's called to the end of that. Great. Can we do the first 2 lines? Well, actually, no, it's so short. Do the whole thing and see, follow along and see what's going on here. Great. So there are so many things in here where Feldman is begging what is possible. Like, just a very concrete example, if you look at the piano line and the last 3 bars, he wants this chord to happen on that 2nd 16th note. It's not possible because the reach is too far. There's absolutely no way to do it. And yet, the idea is, right? So somehow the gesture in the mind and in the body is somehow that it happens all in one way, and it goes like this off the beat. And it's the same with things like which. You made a decision. What was the decision you made? So this is on the 2nd system, 3rd bar, the word which.
I made a decision to put an I both on the A and on the B so that hopefully maybe some people could hear that it was which.
So there's 2 things that you can do with that. Which or which.
Right, yeah, I did not do a shadow vowel.
You didn't do a shadow vowel there. So these are the choices that we're up against. The other thing that we're up against in Feldman is this extreme dynamic requirements. And more often than not, those extremes are only in the piano, pianissimo, pianissimo range, right? It's at the bottom of, conceptually, the threshold of hearing. However, there are lots of considerations for this. How big is the room you're playing? How quiet is the room that you're playing? What instruments are you singing with? What is their absolute dynamic spectrum? Which of course is not absolute, it is only relative, right? And when you start to consider those things, you also can start to consider that piano and pianissimo is a color. These are a range of colors more than it is a decibel level. And that the idea of breath almost always communicates something soft. That's not about breathiness in the sound, right? It's about breath, about flowing, waiting, anticipation. Breath is always moving, even when you are holding your breath in a performance. You're not holding. Nothing's happening here. There's always some kind of movement. So rhythmically, in all these spaces, right? That there's always something that has the texture of soft, even if it's right? That even if it's not soft.
Right.
Can you make us believe it's soft? Can we go from the beginning? Great, let's just take that. Say blah.
Blah.
B-l-a.
B-l-a.
Blah.
Blah.
Right? So that the b-l-a, they are all right here below the belly button.
B-l-a.
And you can even feel b-b-b-b-b. Mm-hmm.
B-l-a.
Yeah. Yeah, that. B. Mm-hmm.
B-la.
B. As short as possible. B. So that like you're only using b, b, b. I'm actually not taking a breath. The glottis is open, and it's like I'm only using the air that's available to me within the breath column. I'm not adding more b behind it. B, b.
B.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If you do the brr, get that feeling, so that like it backs up. Yeah. And I just do one of those. B.
B.
Yes. Tell me about that.
B. Yeah, it's more. It definitely like it really uses a lot of muscles down here actually.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
B.
B. It's hard to access it. B.
Same thing, yeah. Aha. Black.
Black.
Mm-hmm. Great. Now, on that nice F sharp that you have to do it, makes it that much more difficult, right? Don't think soft. Mm-hmm. So if you think the consonant before it, blah, blah, that those things are like really here and actually loud in a way, then the vowel doesn't have to be loud. Mm-hmm. Now do the b on the pitch. Mm-hmm. How is that different?
That feels like more reliable. It feels like easier.
Mm-hmm. It also, it's freer in your body, which means you can go more places with it. You have more choices.
Yeah.
Now, in the instruments, you can also use that consonant, blah, blah, right, to inform your attack from the beginning. Good. So, against, against is long. And I would encourage you, so you see, we get that's where we can get the word. Against. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so also in the cello, right after that, right? 3/16 long, right? Do, and then the thing that happens after that in the cellos is in bar 3, one, that last pizzicato is a result of that harmonic, that bowed harmonic. Can we do these 3 bars again? This is great. Can you just do against? Just sing it. Mm-hmm. Against. Put the n and the nst on the second 16th note.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And against. So don't think of the 16th notes as being short. Think of them as being That's how long a 16th note is in this context, or how long it can be, right? It can be, that is available to you. Mm-hmm. Against. Against. Isn't it? Against. Mm-hmm. So the t is on the second beat, right?
Yeah.
1, 2. Against. Yes. Mm-hmm. And then that against. Why not? Against. Let it bloom. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. And you also have more choices too if you use the G. Against. Against. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let yourself crescendo. It's fine. Yes. You can be expressive. As a matter of fact, this music is more interesting in a way if sometimes you go ooh and then take it away. Right? The music already takes it away. But if you let yourself warm into some things and do we, what are we hearing? We're interested in this kind of thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So allowing yourself to warm into longer things will give us this play between the long and the short. Can we do the first 3 bars again? Yes. Yeah, good. Okay. Right, so I think what why don't we? So this is a productive consideration. The play between long and short. Can we do a performance of this movement, and from all 3 of you, to be focusing on this? When you have a long note, let it develop. Let it develop. And see if sometimes 2 16th notes that are together, do, 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 right, might want to have a little bit more weight so that everything isn't all dry and staccato, that it's going back and forth between this. And I'll leave you alone, but let's do that and play. Lovely. Thank you so much. While come on up. There are so many things to address just within the music itself to unpack what's there. So I apologize sometimes if my dig is like just kind of very deep in one area, but in order to start to make the longer musical phrases and a little bit of an understanding and a fleshing out of some of the smaller issues of gesture is actually super necessary for the performers of the music. It's structure, right? A really robust scaffolding. We don't always see, right? We don't see the interior structure of a building, but it must be there, and it must be sound in every case, and it also must inspire. Those details must inspire the performers to then make those shapes. If you only go for the shapes without understanding that structure, this is what happens when audiences say, yeah, it all sounded the same to me. The music, new music, it all kind of sounds the same to me. I don't understand what's going on. And sometimes that's because the performers might not have found those nodes on the scaffolding on which they can hang the entire performance, right? And of course, the longer you live with a piece, the more in touch you get with what those nodes are. So anyway, next group, thank you.
Shannyn Rinker. This is Neidermayer. We are performing Du Silence by Grahn.
Before we begin, I'm going to read the poem, because this is a poem meant to be understood, but it's in French. So I'm going to read the translation. Sweetness of the evening, sweetness of the room without light. Twilight is sweet like a good death, and the shadow slowly creeping and creeping unfolds in smoke on the ceiling.
Est-ce qu'il est du comme une bonne mort?
Really beautiful. What do you love most about this piece?
Yeah, I don't know. I think of it almost like a playground. He's kind of erecting this room, right, of the poetry, and there's a lot of back and forth. And I think my favorite is finding the extremities of something that's so quiet and so intimate because they're in here, right? Like, and the score is mostly like pianissimo or piano, and maybe there's like a mezzo forte in there for like a second, but most of the time it's so tight and kind of discovering the expansiveness of something that's so constricted. That was a long answer.
That's good. How do you explore that expansiveness of something so small? How do you do it technically? How do you do it as an ensemble? How do you practice it?
I think just really defining where the extremes are first, and then just to kind of feeling out where the music is going, especially, and then seeing where the points are where we can kind of push those extremes even more from where we think they are originally.
I think, I'm sorry. I think we struggled with like trying to stay like super quiet all of the time, and that's not realistic because then you don't see the dynamic range of the piece.
So, did you practice it loud?
Yeah, we tried to.
Somewhat, yeah.
Did you let yourself swing? Did you let yourself find, I mean, not just loud, but like, oh, if it's pianissimo to mezzo piano, I'm going to find out what pianissimo to fortissimo is, right? So that you're, or you think pianissimo to fortissimo, so that you're just really expanding the range, like way beyond what is reasonable and what is asked for, right? But when we're exploring pieces, we have to spread our wings, mostly because we have to find comfort. We have to find comfort in our bodies. We have to know what the notes, rhythms, gestures feel like when they're just uninhibited, and then we have something we can remember. Then we have a tactile sense of freedom, and then we can start removing certain aspects of it while trying to, I don't want to say hold on to, but still notice that core of flexibility and freedom that is available to us when we start to narrow slightly the dynamic range. But also the other thing that we find is that we have different colors available to us, and that colors convey dynamics much better than decibels do, right? Sounds do that. Great. Can we I want to do some of the places where there's a bunch of pitch matching and stuff like that. Where's that? That happens on the second page, right?
Yeah, there's some on the second page. There's some on the first page, the end of the third system.
End of the third system. Let's do that one, right? This is after the spoken thing. So if we look at the score here. So in this third system here, when the bass clarinet comes in, you see that they're both in the same register. And there's a bunch of voice crossings that happen, and they're kind of in each other's business. And this is a real opportunity to start to explore things timbrally between the instruments in a like way, right? We're doing apples to apples in a way, and it's different than the places where the instrument and voice are doing different kinds of things. Then you find other colors in that. But let's look at this apples to apples place, the crépuscule. So you'll have spoken that already. Mm-hmm. So une bonne mort. Mm-hmm. Okay, I would love for you both to do this mezzo forte-ish. I want you to find the gestures in something that's just more generous, okay? Okay, so already we're kind of finding like, oh, where are we in this? Now, what is that vocalese expressing? The vocalies, with a
Oh,
place where
yes.
you're not singing any
think-
text, you're singing ah.
I think that's where you see the smoke forming on the ceiling. That's the unfurling kind of.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a bit magical.
Yes. So can we have that feeling of smoke emerging? I want you to really see that image. I want you to really feel like your body is permeable and like the air is like flowing through your back and out to everybody else, right? But just like you're transparent from both of you, right? You have to open up the skin sensors on your back, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Can you try that?
Yeah.
And I want you to play with vibrato, not vibrato. I want you to play with loud, soft, whatever. I want you to not do what's on the page except for the notes and then the phrases. Think longer, okay? Beautiful,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That might pass for pianissimo. Or at least ethereal.
Right. Color versus dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Affect. Affect. So we're not only kind of going out after colors that are out there somewhere, only that we hear, but like that we feel, that we sense. And we all have this experience every day that something reminds you. Smell is one of those things, actually, right? You walk by a restaurant or something like that and you smell a smell that was like, oh, that was the thing that I ate when I was 7 years old, and it was in my Aunt Rita's backyard, and there were, it was a barbecue. It was the most amazing day, and like you felt you're there, right? You're there. It's the whole day, right? There's 3 clouds in the sky, and there's the uncle there you wish wasn't there, but then there's the barbecue, and and then there's the grass in your feet, and you remember what that felt like when you were playing paddleball or something. I don't know, but like boom, right? It's there. And not only is your mind there, your whole body has gone there. And you feel that space again. Our imaginations are amazing things. And in feeling that space of the smoke on the ceiling, of the bar that looks great but doesn't smell great, right? It was back when we had smoke on the ceiling. But your body is there, and it will make different sounds. It will make different sounds because it's open to them. And when we're trying to make sounds that are on a page, this is so two-dimensional. It's like, oh, it's soft. Oh, it's... But that's not what the composer was thinking when they wrote it. Composers are taught to work from the concept of sound. And it's a different way in to music. They are taught to imagine the sound first, and then to struggle mightily with what notation best represents that idea. And they struggle, and they struggle, and they struggle, and they never put down on paper what they mean. As much as they try. They can't. It's not possible. It's not possible. So as performers, what we have to do is go way beyond the instructions that we see on the page and start to imagine, if we don't know the composer and have not met the composer and can't ask, we have to just imagine for ourselves what might have inspired that. What was the concept of the sound? And then how do our bodies invite that? And if the composer is still with us, we can have that conversation, and it's great. What does that mean for you?
Realizing the composer's ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think trying to inhabit like what they wrote, but also bringing my own sense of how I perform my own instrument to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I see a triple pianissimo, I am definitely gonna start it with almost nothing, you know, and
Because you can.
because I can, and I
A
want.
clarinetist can start from nothing. That is the beauty of a single reed instrument, right? Single reed against a hard surface can start vibrating imperceptibly. The singer works with a double reed instrument. You can think about it that way. With two vocal cords that come together like an oboe or a bassoon reed. An oboist and bassoonist can't start from nothing. No way, right? Neither can singers, really. So if you have to start from nothing, how are you going to do it?
I think a good example is using the consonant to lead in to the vowel.
And there are some consonants that can do that lead-in for us better than others.
Mhm.
What are they? A couple different kinds of them.
Yes.
Right.
Some dental consonants and some closed mouth consonants.
So closed mouth consonants, the humming. But there's still a point where like the sound starts. Then we have this whole category of consonants called fricative consonants, where there's friction. Those can start from nothing if they're unvoiced. Then at the moment that the voice comes in, there's a bump. But what's happened is if you use that consonant before, it gives you an on-ramp and it creates the illusion that something has come from nothing. Where is that concept employed here?
Let's look at that vocalese we were just doing.
Okay.
It has nice
Yes.
parentheses beforehand, and that's multiple locations throughout the score as well.
So can you explore maybe that as an on-ramp into that vocalese, and maybe even just let yourself play with the idea that to see what other colors you can find in an ah-like vowel. Of course, ah is not like ah. Ah can be ah. It can be a lot of different things, a lot of different colors, right? And then behind that too, instrumentalists, clarinetists use vowel a lot, right? Tell us how you use vowel.
I mean, for a lot of like rounder tones, I'm thinking of like an O shape. And if you really want the texture to be kind of thin, I'm thinking like kind of an E.
Mm-hmm. Can you just demonstrate? Play something that has an O behind it. Now play something that has an E behind it. Mm-hmm. Can you do it on the same note? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's subtle color kind of differentiation. What if you changed the vowel while you're playing? Exploit it. Exploit the movement of the tongue. Ah! Uh-huh. Right. That's kind of more lip. But this idea of vowel and mouth space and you know how you bite the reed, all this stuff that we do linguistically, wind players can really exploit for timbre and color. And I think that also that is implied when you have, you're together with a vocalist who also can just kind of migrate with all of those colors. I think you're invited to do that too. Can we do the same place? Une bonne mort. And again, just the idea, a good death.
Can you give me a D, please? Thank you.
Good. Already, right, some things are happening. I think you can go way further with that. You notice that une bonne mort is only pianissimo.
Yeah.
And then the thing that's after it is pianissimo. So that means that you actually have to scale these differently, right? That une bonne mort needs to be a thing to contemplate. And then expound upon it. I want you to do too much.
Okay.
And then notice that towards the end here, right, before you have the unison melody, before you have that, in the voice part, there's a pianissimo crescendo. You can barely see the crescendo up there, but it's there. You need to use that to get to the next place, to connect the phrase so that we go on. Once again, une bonne mort, just sing. Right? Yeah. How does it feel?
It feels colorful. Yeah.
It's so much larger that you can work with.
Yeah. And it's not that much louder, right? And now you have a phrase and a kind of schwung going. And I have to say that it may be you study with Lucy.
Yes.
So this is no longer the case for you, but possibly in your previous singing life, to do that was verboten.
Yes.
Right? If you're singing ah, you have to sing ah all the time until the end of the word, end of the whatever. You cannot, it's like you have to just clean up your vowel and sing one vowel, and that was not allowed. It's allowed. And I think it's even allowed in regular music. The issue is not to not do it. The issue is when and how. There's almost no vocal behaviors that I say to my students no. Almost none. Very, very few. If there's some that are like, yeah, that's not a good idea for your longevity, of course, right? But in terms of like a musical context, almost nothing. It's all a matter of when to do it. And that's stylistically dependent, obviously, the context of the music and the meaning, right? It's all about when. And so to explore in this way is what we must do. It's what we must do, and then it's fun. Totally fun. And then you can even do that with the words. Et l'ombre lentement. This is interesting in the translation that I read. What did it say? It said to creep and creep?
Creeping and creeping, or insinuating and creeping.
Insinuating and creeping. Okay, so it's but they get two different colors on the words that mean kind of the same thing. Yeah. When you have, so this is at the bottom of the page here, and the vocal line is static, and actually so is the clarinet line, right, with the ostinato below it. And et l'ombre, what does l'ombre mean? We lost it here. Okay. What does l'ombre mean?
And the, is it the smoke? No. The long and slowly insinuating and creeping.
Yeah, it's the shadows, right? L'ombre is shadows,
yes.
I think, right? So you can make, again, the thing that isn't true but is useful, it's a useful lie, make l'ombre sound like what it is, shadowy, right? And you can l'ombre, and especially down in that register, play with the nasal, see what that is, and then see what that means to you, Tyler. Yeah? Just from wherever you want on that last system, it's fine.
Yeah.
Good. So, can you make those sounds? And now all you have to do is just to open up a little column without dropping your tongue. Now play with your, move your jaw around. Oh.
Cool.
And then, what's your tempo? Right? Right now I'm feeling like it's proceeding in eighth notes, and I really want to see like it's going quarter notes or maybe even half notes or right? Same thing. Good. So I wonder, I know this is very tricky with bass clarinet too, because there's so much metal going on. Is there any way that could be a little more discreet? Yeah. It's A, not on. It's not rompe, right? Rompe, yeah. Rompe. And I would put the shadow on there just a little bit, right? A little before he ends. So because you're at the bottom of your range, in bottom-ish of your range, it goes much lower, of course. But I think that the color is the thing that you need to let ride this and not have it be soft at all, because Tyler's going to make his crescendo. It's coming up and kind of enveloping you, which can be kind of nice in a certain way, but I would like you to be a little bit more equal. I don't want you to do less. Here we go. Yeah. So, il ombre lentement qui. So now since I don't think you were taking a breath
I
before.
wasn't.
Right?
Not
And so
enough.
now, so you're also allowed to breathe.
Mm.
You're allowed to breathe wherever you can linguistically sell it. There doesn't have to be a rest. If you can make meaning by taking a breath, you can sell it.
Mm.
Right? But you can't make meaning by taking a breath. So that's the singer's consideration when we're thinking about, how to convey meaning that way. Tell me about the breathing sounds. How much time do we have? 3. Okay. Tell me about these breathing sounds that are.
Yeah. There's sharpness to it. I imagined it as like the puffing of a smoke, because when the poem was written, it was like in the 1800s, so they still had the pipes. So I I don't know, that's the imagery I had in my mind. And
Can we look at the top of the page? Because this is where those gestures
Yeah.
are, the very top of it.
Grahn really has this emphasis that is placed on the breathing in and exhaling air. There's like a sharpness to it.
So is it in the instruction that it's sharp inhalation?
There is no instruction, but he has the tenuto markings and then accent markings later on, and he doesn't really put too many accents any other location for the voice other than the breathing.
Okay.
And I thought that was pretty
Great.
notable.
Okay, so notable, so something that we want to evoke from the score is something that the few places where where there's accent, right? How does it feel to do that the way you've been doing it?
Breathless.
To do
Maybe I'm breathing in a shallow breath instead of something a little bit more strong.
And how does it, just demonstrate. So demonstrate this on the first system is the last gesture. How long do you want to do that for in any practice session?
Maybe a few times if I'm feeling really good.
If you're feeling really good. So here's also things where, instructions in the score affect stuff that we want to draw out, and then the rubber meets the road, and we're like, okay, vocally, this is not easy. What would make that easier?
Changing the formants of my mouth to
Right.
make more sound on the inhale and exhale.
Right. So part of the physiological thing that's happening here is that he's asked for it to be on ah and o, which happen to have the most friction way back in the glottis, very, very close to and actually involving the vocal cords. Vocal cords are being held straight. It's very tiring to do that. It's much easier if we had a bright vowel, because then we can reflect that air off of hard surfaces in the mouth. That's not available to us. What is available to us is, especially when we have to do something that's wearing, is to not do the work here, to not even think of the sound as being here, but to have it be here, shorter, and so that you take as much tension away from hearing it. It's not unlike what I was doing with the b, 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 so that you're it's like panting. That it's motivated from here and not from here. Try that.
Okay. Yeah.
Easier, right?
It's different. in a good way.
Right. And then, again, opening the imagination and the body to this sense of wonderment. Just by becoming watchful in your countenance and like thinking that that smoke is somehow behind you. Play with that idea. Yes! Right? And then by that sense of mystery here, you've created a connection then through the breath and through that kinesthetic sense in your body, right? It's like your aura. And we all have these energy fields around us. You can see them, right? With machines and things like that. Some people can just see them, but heat fields and stuff like that, right? That can be measured. So why not engage that idea to create that connection between the two of you, right? And then you can also engage that idea to play with that ah vowel to get that to be more resonant. Open the space behind you. Oh, that's different. And then how gently can you do this? So that's not about soft. That's about mysterious. It's about where you focus your attention performatively, and then the connection that you create with that gesture, and then handing it off to each other in that way. That's brilliant, beautiful. Thank you so much.
and all of the other musicians on stage today. I'm Amber Evans and this is Lena Vidulich, and we are going to be performing selections of Kafka's Fragments by György Kurtág. And as Tony mentioned earlier, this is one of the pieces that she knows very intimately. So I'm very, very nervous to be presenting this, but I'm also incredibly excited to hear her insights to what we've prepared for you today. So of the first part, we will be doing number 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 12, 13, 15, and 16. Most of them are about 30 seconds in length, so very much fragments. Verstecke sind unzählige, Rettung nur eine. Aber Möglichkeiten der Rettung weder so viele wie Verstecke. Wenn mich immer fragt, dass losgelöst vom Satz, flog dahin wie ein Mann auf der Weise. Aufgewacht! Geschlafen! Aufgewacht! Geschlafen, geschlafen. Stockgriff. Gemeinsam ist das alle.
How long have you been working together on these?
We've had it. It's for a while. Yeah, this would probably be the fourth time we've done selections of it in public or something like that.
And you've done all of these in public before, the ones that you selected for today, or
Yes.
are something new to you?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's this piece in its entirety is an hour long, maybe an hour and 5 minutes, and it's arranged in 4 sections. There are 40 fragments, anywhere from 20 seconds to the longest one is probably 8 minutes, actually, right? So there's a couple pieces in it that are actually quite long that kind of serve as, again, kind of the structural weight of the piece. And these all come from the first section, which is kind of like sets up the whole piece as these very rapid fire, one thing after another. So when you perform these pieces and you just kind of start putting that continuity of the first movement together, 19 fragments, then things start to occur to you about what gets grouped together, right? And how you make transitions between the pieces. So the experience of it is a little bit different than one that if you're constructing, if you're doing them out of order. So you should actually feel free, and this is true of most of Kurtág's aphoristic works, that if you take them out of context, you can create your own contexts and your own sets, right?
Yeah.
So that's a common thing that he will do. He writes so many things in all of these fragments. I mean, the majority of his output is fragmental, and that was as a result of a compositional crisis he had back in the 1960s, and then he went into the practice of Marianne Stein, the Freudian psychologist. Out of that time came the idea that he would not compose in long forms, that maybe he should just get started again by doing little tiny things. And that found his way out of that compositional crisis, and it actually became intrinsic to his style of pretty much everything else. Even if he wrote gigantic works, even like the opera that was just premiered last year, the movements, the scenes of that it's a bunch of little things that are linked together in very intentional ways. And it's not easy to create continuities out of those things. But again, with living with things for a long time, those things start to emerge. And then also as you get more comfortable with the extreme technical demands that are made in this, both vocally, but especially for the violinist. This is one of the most difficult pieces in the repertoire for any violinist to have to approach. Again, because there's so much of the writing that's kind of aspirational. There's things that are possible only if all conditions are perfect, right? And but it's actually like every gesture he's thought about and worked out, and he knows that it works at least in isolation, right? And connecting the dots becomes very difficult, right? But you're doing really, really beautifully with it. Really, really beautifully, both of you. We'll get into some of these and we'll read the translation first. So, with Kurtág, the most important thing to him, and I'm going out on a limb here because everything is important to him, the most important thing to him is text. Hands down. Everything that is in here it comes from the text. Every gesture is about the refinement of text. When I first worked with him, it was daunting. It was also life-changing because the importance of text then and also the opportunity to have the interior workings of text, not unlike the Feldman, what we were doing with that. The interior workings of the text are the things that motivate all of the gestures in the piece. The next thing that motivates all the gestures in the piece is functional harmony. Yeah. So even if this all sounds like out of tonal context, everything that Kurtág ever wrote was tonal in its basis. He heard it that way. He hears it, I should say, he is still writing. He hears it that way. And so if you hear something that sounds like a leading tone, it is. Now the question is, what's it a leading tone to and in what context? Those are sometimes hard to tease out, right? The other thing to know about Kurtág is that most of the pieces, or at least fragments, fragments of fragments, are homage. Everything is homage. It is dedicated to somebody. It is inspired by somebody. It's even dedicated to and inspired by people he disagrees with. Because he finds inspiration all the time. And again, it's in the small gestures. So one of those things that is very useful, if you look at number 2. Wie ein Weg im Herbst, right? It's like the path. This whole thing, Kafka-fragments, is all about the path, the way, the journey, yeah. So we have that, yeah. Like a pathway in autumn, it's barely been swept clean, and then it's covered again with dry leaves, right? So this is it's always, I'm on my path, and then I don't know where the path is, but I know the path is there, right? I know I must be following it, but I can't find it. Oh, there it is. Oh, no, it's gone again, right? So these are Kafka's words, but this is like autobiographical for Kurtág. And in the middle of it is a quote. Bedeckt sich wieder. It's not a notes quote, but it's the idea of caro nome. Yes. Right. Can we put that up, number 2?
Yeah, transcription, ready?
Yes. Now, I don't know what caro nome has to do with this poem, and it kind of doesn't matter, right? So we have this first thing that's all of these kind of rushing gestures, swirling leaves, and then, like you're tiptoeing on the path to try to kind of see the places where you can still see the path, bedeckt sich wieder, right? Caro nome. Can we just do that? Have you be Gilda?
Don't have those high E's today. Okay. Bedeckt
Good. Now, I want you to take the opera stage when you do this. Bedeckt sich. I want every note to vibrate. And don't do them from here. Bedeckt sich. Don't tighten your jaw, right? Okay.
Can I ask?
Yes,
I wanted,
of course.
So when he asks for secco, how do I do that as well as vibrate?
Great question. The other thing to know about Kurtág is that everything that is in the score is a contradiction. Lucy knows this. Everything is a contradiction.
Okay.
Right? Because he wants us to suffer. But he's so good-natured about it. Like, yeah, well, in theory, when you work with him, he wants you to suffer, and he has a smile on his face while he's telling you to suffer. So I think that dry, in this case, refers to the leaves.
As opposed to the tempo.
As opposed to the
tone,
voice.
colour, as opposed to the voice. Got it.
So the other thing in working with Kurtág, at least on this piece, it's not true about every piece, is that, we worked very intensely for many days and over a couple of years. And he always wanted me to find my voice. So he did not, for this piece, it's not true for other pieces, but for this piece, he didn't have an idealized vocal sound in that. So we would try all different kinds of things to get it to the point where he felt like I was communicating the text authentically using my voice and struggling with the contradictions in the score appropriately.
Great.
Okay, so in short, use your voice, have the idea of leaves, but also have this idea of waltz. It needs to be a slow waltz.
Bedeckt sich mit der trogenen Blättern.
That's lovely. Lovely, right? So, again, the bedeckt sich wieder. You want to go towards that too, right? So then it doesn't become vertical, it becomes this way. But you're singing it with your voice now, and that's great.
I think the contradictions really help me because I get to vida and it says sempre non espressivo.
Yeah. Right.
Free me from the cage. It's
Uh-huh.
great.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Awesome.
It's fine. But then he would also just ask for something, and I said, but you just said this. Yeah, once it is music that is highly conceptual, but it is not conceptual music. And that's the contradiction right there, right? Is that it's high-minded in a way that, but the result is one that is entirely organic. And he also talks about this. This is the motto of the second section of the piece. It's about walking on the tightrope, right? The path is a tightrope that's not there for you to walk on this way, but it's actually there to trip you. Right? If you turn this way, the wire trips you. And that is dedicated to Pierre Boulez. And Pierre Boulez, he had a complicated relationship with Boulez. Boulez was actually responsible for Kurtág's success in Europe, right? These major recordings of the messages of the late R.V. Trusova, right? This was what put Kurtág on the map. And Boulez championed Kurtág's music, and Boulez himself says the scores are absolutely impossible to reconcile, especially for a large ensemble, right? And Kurtág was grateful to Boulez, but in this message, he's saying that total control in a serial kind of fashion is actually, that kills the music. And then he says after that, because when I asked him about this, he wouldn't really tell me, but all he would say is that the baby decides when it wants to be born, not the mother. That's what he said about that. And so what that means is that all of the conceptual work that he has done on any of these pieces doesn't amount to a hill of beans because the materials had their own ideas. And that's where the tension comes from in that. And that's why the notation is opaque. Because he had an idea and it came out this way and he doesn't know what to do with that still to this day. And so he's struggling to find the way.
Right.
Let's sing. Can we do this whole piece again with the idea of wie ein Weg im Herbst, like big sweeps, and then bedeckt sich, like you're walking through them. Using these images is very helpful for him.
Wie ein Weg im Herbst, kaum ist reingekehrt, bedeckt sich wieder mit der trockenen Blätter.
That kind of has some schwung. It doesn't have to be so careful. Let's look at Verstecke, the next one. So, translation of this. Hiding places are many, right? Rettung nur eine. The way is what we have. Countless hiding places, but only one salvation. But then again, there is many paths to salvation as there are hiding places. Contradiction is everywhere. It is everywhere. Here we go.
Verstecke sind unzähliger, Rettung nur eine. Habe Möglichkeiten der Rettung, wähle so viele wie Verstecke.
Great. Tempo marking, presto.
True.
Next tempo marking, più presto. And then a tempo, which one? I don't know. Is it presto or più presto, right? But I think that there's something about presto.
It's like more frantic, like trying to find the...
Right, I see the hiding places.
Yeah.
And then Rettung nur eine. Here's where the philosopher comes out, right? And this is, Kurtág has this big thing about, objective things being spoken objectively. And he loves those kind of moments of clarity where the philosopher comes out and just states, ich brech meine Hindernisse, that one, right? Yeah, that's also like the philosopher coming out. And then you're, broken by this thing. But, so, and then we go, aber Möglichkeiten der Rettung, wieder so viele wie Verstecke. I think it could be more frantic.
Okay. Verstecke sind unzählige.
Great. How can you get the feeling of hiding places into your voice?
Probably have like as if I was more hyperventilating with it.
But you can't hyperventilate because you have to sing.
No, in my head, that's what I'm feeling.
Not in your head,
Okay.
in your body.
Right.
Can you imagine a time that you had to find something? I have to find it. Oh my God, I'm gonna be in so much trouble if I don't find it.
Okay.
Go to your childhood to find those things.
Right. Verstecke sind unzähliger, Rettung nur eine. Habe Möglichkeiten der Rettung.
Great. Più presto. Aber Möglichkeiten Möglichkeiten der Rettung.
Yeah.
And then those things, they become a little bit more out of time.
Okay.
So this is also the thing, like, you notice there's no meters written in any of these bars. They're written kind of gesturally. Stringendo molto, right? And there's different time, right? Different time between each gesture. So, like, you have to work things out rhythmically, of course, you do. But then at a certain point, that work has to give way to the meaning, right? And the meaning in this is scampering, looking, finding.
Yep.
So you just need to go. Good. That first line was great. Do that again. It's great.
Verstecke sind unzählige, Rettung nur eine, habe Möglichkeiten der Rettung, werde so viele wie Verstärker.
Much better. Yeah? Aber Möglichkeiten der Rettung. Aber Möglichkeiten der Rettung. Can I hear the consonants?
Aber Möglichkeiten der Rettung.
Yeah. Aber Möglichkeiten der Rettung. Yeah.
Aber Möglichkeiten der Rettung.
Speak it more, sing it less.
Aber Möglichkeiten der Rettung.
Möglichkeiten der Rettung. Vertical.
Aber Möglichkeiten der Rettung.
Yes, that's getting there. Now you can still keep your eyes alive. Aber Möglichkeiten. So all of the text goes here.
Aber Möglichkeiten der Rettung.
Oh, yes. How's that different?
It's different.
Yeah? Okay. Let's see. Berceuse, it's number 5. This is an homage to Mahalia Jackson. Schlage deinen Mantel. Let it go. Let it be soulful. Again, you know, it's dolce, espressivo, molto semplice, right? So all contradictions. Dolce, espressivo, molto semplice. Simply. Good, right? So the tempo was a little faster this time. It just kind of flowed a little bit more. But yes, you are just allowed to sing that with your voice, and should. Another waltzes? No, I know what I wanted to do. Let's go to the 2 minutes. Einmal brach ich mir das Bein. That one? No. The walking sticks. That's the one I want to go to. So number 15. So this translation on Balzac's walking stick, I overcome all obstacles. And on my stick, all obstacles overcome me. And what they have in common is the word all. So even though the beginning is mezzo voce senza espressione, This is like a chorale opening. Ya-da-dee-da-da-da. Yeah? Take your time. Even slower. Noodle. Yeah, and you can, I know it says senza espressione. Senza espressione does not always mean senza vibrato. You need to have just a little bit of something, because the harmony demands it.
Auf Balzac Spazierstockgriff.
Good. So I think that in order to really get the text across, you should not go too slowly.
Okay.
Right? Again, there's no tempo given in any of this. There's all of these notes that are relative values. You see there's no stems on any of those notes once the text begins there, right? So it just means long and short is basically what it means. And then there are places where he has little fermata-like things on there that means longer, or if they're turned upside down, it means shorter. So it's a relative notation. And it all goes with the text. Ich breche alle Hindernisse, right? And those accents, he actually means it's not just to be loud, right? It's actually to be articulated in the way that a string player would articulate those things too, legato, but... And auf Balzac Spazierstockgriff, colon, right? You have to connect those. It's a colon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Auf Balzacs Spazierstockgriff. Ich breche alle Hindernisse.
Great. But then, as all syllables are not created equally, right? Ich breche alle Hindernisse. So the amount of accent and how you connect to the next syllable is all linguistically dependent.
Right.
This is much better. Do this again. It's good.
Auf Balzacs Spazierstockgriff. Ich breche alle Hindernisse.
Deflated. Yes.
Auf
Oh, wait for this. Yada-da-dee-da-da. Auf meinem.
Auf meinem.
Oh, I think we have to hear the joke first before you say auf meinen.
Okay.
Right? I know he's placed it in the bar that way. That's the other thing. It's like things that look like they're supposed to line up vertically for Kurtág. No. Right? Sometimes yes, but oftentimes no. You have to hear the joke first in this case.
Right.
So that line.
Auf meinem.
Good. Good. And the notation here, if you notice, if you go back to the top part too, so these are accents. Ich breche alle Hindernisse. And then the next line, it's tenutos. Mich brechen alle Hindernisse, right? Oh, as opposed to ha, 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 right?
Right.
When we do that line again, one more time. This is very good.
Okay. Auf meinem.
And go on.
Gemeinsam ist das alle.
Yay. And that little thing there, Ossia, right? So das alle, or alle. Nice of him to write it in viola clef for us. But there are a couple of things in this where there are distinctly male characters in a way that he wants in, right? He's talking about Balzac and himself and whatever in the Kafka, and so he will. There's a movement in here that's all in viola clef. I see. It's the I live fast, right? I see a.
That's the one.
Yeah, it's a love story, right? And it all happens in 30 seconds, right? And the punchline is I live fast, right? And and it's all done down here in viola clef. It's really kind of fun.
So knowing that that's an Ossia, I mean, is that just dependent on where the speaking voice
Yeah.
is? Okay.
Yeah. If you did gemeinsam ist das. But I don't think that that's the character.
Same, yeah.
Gemeinsam ist, I think you should read it as you. Gemeinsam ist das alle. And it's Sprechstimme anyway. It just means low.
Yeah.
And that the alle should be something like a fourth apart.
Right.
We could go forever. And I hope we do sometime.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. It's great. It's great. You're welcome.